Well, I think we probably ought to get started pretty soon. It is, according to my clock, it's 2:06. So we'll need Jessica as soon as she's with us. I don't. Oh, there
I
you are.
am certainly right here with you. Yes, Yvonne, if you put your Zoom on speaker, then you'll see my face very large. If you leave it in gallery view, you'll see other people here today. But my name is Jessica Turner. I'm the executive director of the American Folklore Society, which is the international organization. It's an academic and professional organization for the field of folklore. And we have scholars and researchers, teachers, museum curators, cultural practitioners, artists, activists, everybody who is interested in the field of folklore and folk life, which is pretty much everything, are often interested in our organization and learning with each other. And so we welcome you here today. Our annual conference this year is in October in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And one of the things that we always do as part of our annual meeting is some local programming that really honors the artists and the traditions of the area that we are coming to visit and to meet as a gathering of those interested in our field. This year, as we all know, has been very disrupted, and we are trying to carry forward with resilience in our own way, and have been able to put together these series of virtual sessions in order to continue conversations with the traditional artists that our local arrangements committee and chairs, Yvonne Millspaw, thank you, Yvonne, and Brant Ellsworth have been working with and pulled together. So we're delighted to have everybody here in this virtual space, thanks to generous funding from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Creative Catalyst Fund. And we welcome all of you to come in person to our meeting in October in Harrisburg. On October 21st through the 24th. We'll be downtown at the Hilton Harrisburg. We invite you all as our guests for that conference, where we'll continue conversations about tradition and resilience and the environment, political and traditional environment in the state capital of Harrisburg. We invite you all to join us there. I want to thank AFS staff for helping us to pull this together, especially Christopher Muley, who has really helped on the production end of all of these virtual sessions, and I really appreciate his time as we've pulled these together, along with our colleagues at the Susquehanna Folk Music Society, who have really helped us to produce, identify, and have already curated a lot of content that we've been able to share out. And we really appreciate that. So with our thanks to Anne and Anju and Joni for being with us today to share, we're honored to have you spend some of your time with us today. We really are looking forward to a lovely conversation about your fiber arts tradition and how it fits into your community. So I'm going to turn it over to Yvonne now to give introductions. We see this as a casual conversation and a celebration of some of the many wonderful art forms in throughout Pennsylvania, but certainly in the Harrisburg region. So Yvonne, take it away, and thank you for the work you've done for this.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And I'm really very delighted to be here with you. Christopher, did you have anything you wanted to add to what's going on?
Yes. Thanks, Yvonne. So so I'll be helping with facilitating questions to our panelists today. And just also want to say that if you have any technical issues, you can let me know. We also want to encourage people to put their cameras on and be part of the larger screen. You can facilitate your screen by either seeing a gallery view or a speaker view, but because we're coming out of this pandemic, I think we should all try to get used to contact. And so this will be a test for all of us to get used to seeing each other. And we also have some teachers in the room, so they know that if you shut your cameras off, there's a possibility you are engaged in solitaire or Googling the weather, or I don't know, reading the news or something like that. So we're watching, they're watching, and you're all in trouble. And if you have questions, I'm going to help facilitate that. And you could put them in the chat. You could just type it in there and I'll track it and make sure it's answered. So thanks so much for everyone joining us. And thanks so much to Yvonne, who did a great job facilitating all this, and to our panelists. So that's it. Yvonne, take it away.
Okie doke. I am happy to do that. I'm Yvonne Millspaugh. Let's see if I can get my picture up here. I guess Chris is going to have to do that. So
we all see you. You're good.
okay, that's good. I'm Dr. Yvonne Millspaugh. I'm a senior folklorist. I am co-chair along with Dr. Brant Ellsworth of the local planning committee for the American Folklore Society 2021 meeting. And we want to extend an extremely warm welcome to all of you who are coming here. This is our third Zoom live event called Here from Harrisburg virtual series. Today, we'll be talking with 3 textile artists. Ann Holt, who's a quilter. Ann will wave to you, I think. There's Ann, okay. And Andrew Singh, who will wave to us, I'm sure, Andrew, and then Joni Osterholt. Joni is a crochet artist, all of them from this region, very, very close by. Both Ann and Andrew have studios in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. For those of you who aren't here yet, if you drive straight east out of Harrisburg and you pass the Walmart, you're pretty much in Hummelstown. Hummelstown is bordered on one side by Harrisburg and squished on the other side by Hershey. So the air smells nice most days. Joni is on the West Shore. Now, again, when you come to Harrisburg, you're going to find out there's a big difference between East Shore and West Shore. So Ann and Andrew and I right now are on East Shore, but Joni is in the trendy area of the West Shore, which is across the river in the town of Duncannon. All 3 of our artists are teachers, so kindly just be aware of that. Joni is a first grade teacher. Andrew is a college physics professor in her spare time, and Anne teaches quilting, quilt making in her studio, and she's also written 2 or 3 books about it. So we will be hearing from all of these things. We really are thrilled that we're able to do this summer-long virtual series because, of course, with COVID, we're not going to be permitted to have artists on site as we normally do. So this one-on-one stuff that at least I've always come to love is going to not be possible this year. So we're doing the very, very best that we can by having these conversations with our 3 textile artists. So again, we really need to thank the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, who has provided a Catalyst grant for us to actually put these things together. So I'm going to introduce our artists one at a time, and each artist will tell you something about her art and her work, and I think probably share some images. So I'm going to begin with Ann Holt. Ann is a quilt maker. She has a studio called Filament Studio, which I think you'd be very, very welcome to visit here in Hummelstown. She works in a number of really, really interesting ways with reproducing traditional quilts. She works with Quilts of Valor. That's another one of her books. She works with the Peacemakers Guild. And I'm going to stop there. Ann, please take it, introduce yourself, if you would.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me here. This is so unique and unusual and fun opportunity. It's nice to meet everyone. It was funny that you were talking about the East Shore, West Shore. One of the things that I'm involved in is antique quilt study groups. And so we look at quilts that were made, back in the 1800s up to today. And when we look at the 1800s, we really see a difference between styles of quilts made on the East Shore and the West Shore. Anytime there's a barrier between 2 areas, they don't share the information so easily. So it's interesting. We really do see a difference. I've been quilting. I just did the math for over 45 years, so I've done it all, I guess. And I started off by thinking everything had to be by hand, and now I've everything I do now is by machine. A guy came into the shop the other day and he was looking at one of my quilts and he said, "So is this all handmade?" And I said, "No, it's all machine made." And he said, "Oh, so then it's not a real quilt, right?" So, but I didn't slap him, which I was thinking about doing. But I asked him, what kind of quilts does he make? And he says, "Oh, well, I don't quilt." So I said, "Okay, get out. You're gone." But anyone else is welcome to come in. So I've been quilting for a long time. I had a quilt shop in Gettysburg. We used to live in Gettysburg, and the irony about having a quilt shop is you don't get to quilt very much. And so I've just been involved with quilting for a long time, and I see quilts everywhere. And as Yvonne said, I'm involved with Quilts of Valor, and I'm on the road to becoming an appraiser. I found out that I'm qualified but not certified yet. So, and I'd like to show you. I mean, I think that this may be the time to show you a couple of pictures of what I do. This quilt behind me that I wrote a book. Is that what you want me to do, Yvonne, or do you want to go on and have other people? Go ahead. Oh, okay. To show you a little bit about what I do right now and how that sort of relates to folklore and cultural activities. So let me just share my screen real quick. I'll just show you a few. It's just a few pictures. This isn't a whole PowerPoint thing. Are you seeing it? Yeah. Okay. This is the quilt that you saw behind me. Was my reproduction of this quilt. This is a quilt that was made in the 1860s in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and it's a sampler. It's a quilt about learning to quilt. It was made by a 17-year-old girl who was learning to quilt, and a sampler represents all the things you need to know in order to be a quilter. So you'll find everything in here. Including applique, that the center block. So what I wanted you to see on this is that, first of all, it's these diamond-shaped blocks are unique. These 17-year-old girls who were rebelling against their parents, their mother made square blocks, which is just so 1850s, you know. They wanted to update to the 1860s and make diamond-shaped blocks. And we don't see this particular diamond-shaped block outside of northern Lancaster County. So it was very interesting to us at our study group. The woman who owns it brought it in, and we just all recognized that this was something very unusual and different. And I'd like to just show you, I mean, I could talk to you for an hour or 2 hours about this quilt, but let me just show you a couple of things that I think relate this quilt to folklore and to cultures. This is a close-up of one of the blocks in the quilt. The blocks are all 8 inches point to point. But this kind of piecing, I don't know if you can see my pointer here, is called Seminole piecing. Quilters today call that Seminole piecing because it was done by the Seminole Indians, but in Florida. But they didn't start doing that until the 1800s. I mean, until the early 1900s. But I kind of doubt that there was any interaction between the Seminole Indians in Florida and the Pennsylvania Germans in the middle 1800s. But I've also seen this same kind of patchwork in Indian textiles. So I think that this is a kind of patchwork that you'll see done by anyone who has to deal with little pieces of fabric. They'll figure out how to do this. So we call it Seminole piecing, but that's not what it would have been called at the time. And you can kind of see that these little squares are sewn together. So it's a process of sewing together and cutting apart, sewing together, cutting apart until you get these intricate designs. But we see that in a lot of different textile cultures. This quilt was made by Pennsylvania Germans who were surrounded by, I mean, my line is that if something would stand still for a minute, the Pennsylvania Germans would paint it or decorate it or carve it or something, you know. So we see a lot of the tree of life with the bird of paradise on the top. And you also see that. So where did she get the idea to do this applique? Well, she got it from the painting that she saw at the time. The Proctor art painters created these drawings, you know. So we see that in this quilt. Here's another one. She would have seen these tulips painted everywhere. That's a Pennsylvania German thing. And she was not a great applicator, but this, you can see the relation. You can see the crossover between the painting culture and the applique. And also, there's a correlation between what you see around you and what you work on in your quilts. I think that on a farm, she would have seen this horse-drawn harrow and tried to interpret it in applique. So that's what I think that this block is. And so that same design, so we're talking about my life in quilting in two or 3 minutes, is that quilts, they connect from the past to the present. So this diamond shape, which was unusual, which I and some people in my study group, we recognized it as an unusual shape. So now I use it in so many different things. And so these are 2 quilts that I've made that use that same diamond shape. It's an unusual diamond. And this is one that I made for Quilts of Valor. Quilts of Valor is a project for making quilts to give to veterans. So we make quilts and award them to veterans. And so that's where the red, white, and blue comes from. We also study quilts from the area. This is one of my favorite quilts that we've looked at in our study group. It's from Hummelstown. It was an entry to the 1939 World's Fair. The quilt theme that year was Century of Progress. And you see the phone and the woman's name, and that's her phone number in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. So we see these things, and I mean, they're just so wonderful. And so this is my last picture. I just wanted to show you that, like, this quilt on the upper right is a quilt from 1903, early 1900s. And so what I do, I write patterns, I write books, I write reproduce quilts for other people, I write patterns. But this is a pattern that I wrote based on this quilt. So there's 100 years, 150 years between those two, 100 more years, 200 years between those two. And so I made it in these sort of traditional red, white, and blue colors. But then someone else took that same design and used these sort of jewel tone colors to make it to make it different. So yeah, so everything goes, you know, from the past to the through our lives, and we work with it and then into the future. And that's my take on quilting and what I do. Let me just escape out. Is that what you were hoping for, Yvonne?
Absolutely. And I think it's a wonderful introduction to some of the changes in quilting, that is from what we think of as a traditional quilting, which is we think of hand done stuff and hand quilting, into the reality of what quilting is as it continues. We reuse the same patterns, but we change the techniques, we change the colors, we change all of your quilting as well as your piecing is done by machine, which is kind of a traditional no-no, except of course it's reality. That is exactly how it's done. So I'm going to ask Angie next, if you would be willing to speak about the art you are talking about. Angie owns she has a PhD in physics or something, but she also runs a shop called Anchal and does apparel and jewelry, mostly aimed at, well, the fabric and such comes from India. And Angie, if you would want to speak now a little about yourself and your quilting and your fibers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for having me here. Can everybody hear me? Awesome. So yeah, as Yvonne indicated, I have a background. I call myself like a cat with 9 lives, except I don't know, I'm past my 9 lives. I'm way past 9 lives. I was born and raised in India. I went to medical school in India, so I have a doctorate degree. I did my residency in ophthalmology, so I'm actually trained as an eye surgeon. But my arranged marriage brought me to the United States, and within a year of being in this country, I was a victim of domestic violence, went through separation and divorce when my son was about 2 years old. And my medical degree is not recognized here. And I was on an H-4 visa status, which I call handicapped to the 4th degree. And recently I heard it's called the dead body visa. Without going into details of that, basically I found myself in a foreign country with no friends, no family, no support, 2-year-old son, and no education technically that I can use to work. And I cannot work even if I wanted to. So on that fun spot, I'm like, okay, now what do I do? So I went back to school and got a PhD in molecular medicine. So my research was actually in lung cancer. And if surviving domestic violence and abuse and being in a foreign country with no network and no support and being a single mom wasn't hard enough, my experience as a graduate student was probably the worst years of my life. So I call my PhD get out of Alcatraz ticket. So I got my ticket, I got out of Alcatraz, but I was like, now what do I do? What do I really want to do when I grow up? Right? Long story short again, because I was a single mom, I was not allowed to relocate in order to pursue a profession. And with my qualification, there was really no other institution that I could find employment. I found myself unemployed and on welfare, and I was not allowed to go back where I came from. Because as a single parent, you're not allowed to relocate with a child without the permission of the other parent. So long story short, that is how I started my business. I said, I got to do something to put food on the table. And I wanted to do something, and I'll be really, really honest here. I wanted to do something that does not compete with, threaten, or in any way, shape, or form intersect with a white man. That was the reason why I started my business. Because I said a white man ain't going to be wearing a sari anytime soon. Right? So that's how I actually got into this business. And my mother, till her dying day, could not wrap her mind around, what do you do exactly? Because in my mom's brain, I'm still a doctor, I'm still a surgeon, I'm still in the sciences field. The arts and textile and fashion was just not something that my mom even imagined I would do. But I said, Mom, I'm just doing something that can put food on the table. So that's how I became an artist. Indian clothing, and I think Yvonne is extremely generous calling me an artist and or an expert in Indian textile. I became an expert because I lived in it. I was surrounded by it, right? So I never considered myself an expert, you know. It's like me calling all of y'all, you're like expert in being Americans. Well, yeah, right? So that's how I became an expert and or an artist. The Indian culture, I'm also an army brat. So my father served as a doctor in the Indian Army. And the huge advantage of that was that every 3 to 4 years, we got to move. And if anyone's been to India, you would know that each state in India is like a whole different country. They have a different spoken, written language with different alphabet, different grammar, different construction of sentence, different cuisine, different clothing. They sometimes even celebrate the same festivals in very different ways. So it's like a whole different country, a whole different culture. And so I feel I was very blessed and my life was very enriched by moving around different parts of India and actually living there and getting to know the culture and sort of really being involved in it. And that's how I've got all my knowledge about the different Indian textiles and fabrics. So to show you a quick map of India in relation to textiles is this image right here. So up in the north, we have the state of Kashmir, which is popular for its Kashmiri. So up here is the Himalayan mountains. So the winters get really cold and you get snow here. So the Kashmiri wool, the Pashmina shawls are famous for this area. And I'll show you a few examples of what Kashmiri embroidery looks like. So my mother is from the state of Kashmir. So the work from here, the clothing and the artwork from Kashmir is very near and dear to me. Kullu shawls. So Kullu Manali is again a hilly area. I actually had my honeymoon there. So the Kullu shawls are distinct and different from the Kashmir area. If you come to the state of Uttar Pradesh, the chicken curry work, also known as Lucknow work, is very common. And what you're seeing behind me, these are examples of Lucknow work. And in embroidery, I did embroidery in high school. We also call it shadow work. So if you can get a little peek of this flower here, you see how the outline of the flower, the threads are on the right side, but on the wrong side, you've still got the fibers crossing over and you're seeing the shadow of those threads through the fabric. So it's called shadow work. So that's what we call Lucknow work because of the city Lucknow, which was kind of sort of the hub for this work, but it's also called chicken curry work. And then if you go up into the east, you have beautiful fabric in the east. Here in the west, we have bandhani print, bandage print, which is a tie and dye. And I have samples here that I can show you of tie and dye. So, you know, we see tie dye here in the US and we think of hippies. You think of those big, bright colored, swirly prints. But tie dye in India is really very fine. And I'll stop screen share and show you a sample of that real quick. What I'm wrapped in is tie dye. This is bandage print. This is tie dye. So this is how fine, if you can appreciate, I have just taken apart all the things. So they literally take these tiny dots and they tie threads around them and then they dye them. So they start with a white fabric and the places that they want to keep white are tied. So this part would be tied. Then the whole fabric will be dyed in the next light color, say something like a yellow. Then whatever spots have to be saved as yellow are then tied. And then the whole fabric is dyed the next dark color. Let's say if it's red, then all the spots that have to be saved as red are tied. Then the whole fabric is dyed the next dark color, which in this case is green. Then if you want to save some spots as green, you tie the little spots green and then dye the whole fabric the next dark color, which could be black. And then when you're done with everything and everything dries out, then you undo all the little threads and then you get this beautiful pattern. And if this rings a deja vu bell of this is what you do for batik, this is literally what you do with batik, except you don't tie and dye the fabric, you paint the fabric with wax. And I've learned batik work too, and actually it's a tablecloth in my boutique at the back of the boutique work that I did in middle school. But you can see the kind of fine work required to do that kind of work. It's absolutely fascinating. And then so this was hand done, but for commercial, large production, we have 7-yard saris that are made with the similar print. And I'm not 100% sure, but I won't be surprised if this is done by some sort of machines. So we have this full sari, 7 yards of cloth with that tie-dye. We call it bandhani print, but some people also call it bandage print. And then you have the embroidery and the falls attached to it to give it that material. So this is authentic of western part of India. And since I'm showing you samples, I'll show you the Kashmiri work. This is known as Ari embroidery. If you can see, it is really, really fine, just beautiful work. And when I learned it, it was not as fine as this, but we called it chain stitch in embroidery. This is chain stitch, but you can see how fine and how beautiful and really, really close it is. So I have outfits and other material. This is a shawl made out of pure wool with Ari embroidery, which is hallmark of Northern India, Kashmir. Something close to that Kullu print that I showed you, again, Northern India. This is something similar to that. And this is known as Jamwar shawl. And you can see the prints are so different. The weaving is so different in these shawls compared to the Ari embroidery that we see in Kashmir. So they're right next to each other geographically. Climate-wise, they're the same. They both need warm clothes, but of course they got to have a distinct identity, right? So that's Kullu. Where my father is from the state of Bihar, we do embroidery, and that's called kasida work. And I have, and this is all hand done. Till today, it is hand done in the villages, in the rural areas of Bihar. And it's got a little bit of mirror work with it to give it that little glitzy shine to it. Absolutely beautiful. This is again on pure wool. And I also have a pleat work. This is common all across India. This one is on pure pashmina shawl, and the applique work is done with silk. This is pure silk. I don't know if you're able to see it properly. And this is again all hand done. You can see the hand stitching on the side of the applique work. And this is a full length shawl. So this is not just a stole. Stole is not as wide. You can see this is a pretty wide shawl and quite long. And in India in the winters, they literally bundle themselves up in this. So it's not just a fashion statement, they literally need this to stay warm. So these are the warmer fabrics from northern part of India. But as we start coming down in the peninsula of India, the climate is not so cold. So it starts getting warmer down here. And what's really famous in the rest of India are the different kinds of silk. So cotton is a natural fabric. In India, cotton is very, very common, very popular. I wore cotton most of my childhood. It breathes really well. It keeps you warm in the winter, cool in the summer, absorbs sweat and something. And from an environmental point of view, cotton is a fantastic fabric. And then next comes silk. So all our wedding saris and fine wear is silk. Silk is another natural fabric. But each part or each region of India has its own authentic silk. So in the northern part of India, in the city of Banaras, we have Banarsi silk saris. So my wedding sari was a Banarsi silk sari, and the embroidery done on that is done with pure gold threads. And I can show you a few examples of that as we go along. So this is an example of the Kashmiri Pashmina shawl with the Ari embroidery. This is an example of the hand-woven Kullu shawls found in Kullu Manali, just south of Kashmir. This is an example of the shadow work or the Lucknow work or the chikankari work. And this is Deja Vu, my middle school sewing class. These are Bhagalpuri saris. It's the Bhagalpuri silk, again, authentic of the region of Bhagalpur in India, which is in the northeastern part of India. Fulkari embroidery, you can see this is a different kind of embroidery. It's like taking your Lucknow work and flipping it over, looking at the other side of it. And so Fulkari clothes, Fulkari cushion covers, Fulkari jackets. I have something very similar to that. This is like a little vest, and it has embroidery, which is very much like a Fulkari embroidery. And again, this is very common in the northern and eastern parts of India. And on the right, you can see it's got Fulkari embroidery with some shisha work. Shisha means mirror or glass work. And shisha and glass work is again very authentic of the state of Rajasthan. This is bandage or bandhani print that I just showed you, the little tie and dye. All of these little dots are tied by hand, and then the fabric is dyed. Chanderi silk is another North Indian silk, very popular in India. This is Paithani silk. So Paithani silk has a huge story. It's all hand woven silk. And this industry is currently suffering a lot because of the mass production and synthetic fibers and stuff. So folks who are, whose heartstrings are tied to supporting local artists and hand artists are going back into supporting real silk and hand woven silk. So Paithani silk, all the silk industry really supported a large number of artists who are hurting a lot with the polyester, rayon, synthetic mass production industry. So there's some movement to try and revitalize this hand woven pure silk industry and the pure wool industry. This is Banarsi silk, and as I said, these saris, they are now, because of the cost of gold going up, really becoming harder and harder to find just because they're getting so ridiculously expensive. But when a Banarsi sari gets old and the silk starts decaying and debris, they actually burn the sari to melt the gold so they can reweave the gold threads and weave it into a new sari. So this is real gold. So these saris can get really, really expensive. but they're absolutely beautiful. Coming down to the south, the silk saris worn in southern India are known as Kanjivaram silk. So that's a slightly different silk. And one way you can identify a Kanjivaram silk sari is when you flip it over to the wrong side, you can see the weaving and the raw ends of the silk fabric. And I have a couple of examples of Kanjivaram saris that I can show you in a minute. And I think this is the last one. This is Ponchampalli Ikat print. So this kind of print is known as Ikat print. And on the left, you can see that is my sari. I own saris from all different parts of India. When I got married, my mom gave me 51 different saris from the 51 different regions of India at my wedding. So this is one of my saris. As you can see, I'm wearing this Ponchampalli Ikat. This was when I was the commencement speaker at HAC's spring graduation ceremony on Zoom. So I was able to save that picture. And I think that's all the pictures I have. And to just show you in real life what the Kanjivaram silk looks like. This is a pure Kanjivaram silk sari. Absolutely beautiful, breathtaking. I could be biased, but I don't think I've ever met a single woman who doesn't look absolutely spectacular in a sari. Doesn't matter her age, shape, size, height, weight, color, hair. There is not a single woman on this planet who doesn't look breathtakingly fantastic in a sari. Anyone who wants to come and learn how to wear a sari, I'm always more than happy to help you.
Angie, thank you so much. That's a wonderful way of looking at these fabulous fabrics that are carried in your shop and which is very accessible for those of you who will be in Harrisburg. It's really, really awesome to go in there. And I plan on taking you up on the sari wrapping at some point. I think that would be fine. I understand you also can wrap turbans for the gentlemen if they were interested in learning how to wrap a turban. Okay, thank you so much. And did there any questions that have come up yet, Chris? I don't see any.
No, not yet. Yeah, but anyone's free to put it in the chat or just speak up right now. Feel free to.
Well, let's go on.
Got it.
Let's go on and we'll introduce Joni Osterholt, who is bringing us yet another very important tradition in the textile and fiber arts of the world, really. She's going to speak to us on crocheting, and she also quilts, but mostly crochets, knits, cans, peaches, does a number of other really important other things. Joni's a first grade teacher and is also just wonderful, wonderful craftsperson. So Joni, do you want to introduce yourself and again, show us examples of what your work is?
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, and thank you so much for including me and inviting me today. Most of my fiber craft is crochet. As Yvonne mentioned, I do knit. I also do a little bit of quilting, but I don't do the type of quilting that Anne does. My quilting is a very basic quilting where I have two fabrics. One is a cotton or cotton blend. The other side is a flannel, so it's nice and soft with cotton batting in between. I machine quilt it and I machine sew ribbon around the edges. One example I have over here, I designed an applique for my husband. We're both, if any of you are familiar with Doctor Who, we're avid Doctor Who fans. So I see a thumbs up. Thank you, Yvonne. So here's one. This fabric reminded me of the Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. And that's one of our favorite episodes of Doctor Who, if any of you follow that. So I designed an applique of the TARDIS and did hand embroidery on it. And that's his favorite quilt. He doesn't go to bed without it. Let's see, but I just do very basic quilting. Crochet and knitting are my two best loves in the fiber arts. My mother taught me to knit when I was 5 years old. That was a really long time ago, more than 55 years ago. So I've been crocheting for a long time. Probably about 3 years later, my Irish grandmother started teaching me to crochet, and she loved to crochet doilies and she loved to crochet Afghans. So those are some of my favorite things to do. This is actually one of my Irish grandmother's doilies that she hand crocheted. The pineapple motif, as you see on the edges, this is a centerpiece. It has 16 pineapples around the edges. She was always making these. They were one of her favorite things to crochet. In her older years, her vision started going, so her tips are not the typical tips that you would, let's see if I can put that to the camera. The tips don't meet the way that they should, but it was my Ganny, that's what we called her, and it's her and who she was. I had always thought of fixing them, but then no, this was a family tradition of my grandmother, so I just left it as is. And this is on the buffet in our dining room. When I was either 8 or 9, my Italian grandmother's oldest sister came for a visit from Ohio. We lived in the Washington, D.C. area at the time. And Aunt Laura taught me how to crochet lace edgings onto handkerchiefs. And this is the handkerchief that she gave me and taught me to crochet lace with when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Kept it all these years. Let's see. So let me think here. Right. Okay. So I've got all kinds of things around me to share with you that I've done through the years. So I got a pattern with a set because to honor my Irish grandmother. So this is a sample of a 6-pointed lamp or candle doily that I made to continue my Irish grandmother's tradition. Just 6 points, fits beautifully under a lamp. You see all the nice work. And my tips are done the traditional way. I don't know if you can see that, where you actually have a nice point at the top. Years ago, I had crocheted for that same grandmother a white tablecloth, which has since disappeared. No one in the family knows what happened to it. But in her honor, earlier this year, you know, we all needed things to keep us sane during the pandemic because you couldn't go anywhere. So I ordered fabric or crochet threads, cotton crochet threads, and I started doing things like this. This is the same pattern that my Irish grandmother crocheted her centerpieces from, but this, I can't hold it up quite big enough. It's quite wide. It will go over the top of a round table. In honor of my grandmother and to continue her tradition. I actually did 2 of them, one a little bit bigger so that it hangs further down. And these pineapples, if I put it next to my head, you can see the size of how big that really is as compared to what my grandmother crocheted, which is much smaller, right? And it's just using a thicker cotton thread, using a larger crochet hook, just to get a different texture and a little bit different feel to it. Pineapples have been a big part of my crochet. Another thing I did earlier this year, you know how we all join those Facebook groups and you get all kinds of wonderful ideas and new traditions that you haven't seen. Well, I saw a pineapple Afghan that was absolutely stunning, I thought. They had crocheted it in white and I thought it was lovely. I found a pattern for it and replicated it in yellow. This fits on my queen size bed. Let me see if I can turn it right side up for you so you can see the pineapples a little bit better. So here's the pineapple motif, but they're not just straight across, they're kind of offset, and it's all one piece. This is not done in strips like so many of them are done. A lot of crocheters traditionally would do things in pieces and put the pieces together like quilts, except that they're done with yarn. This one was all one piece and intrigued me, and I had to had to do it and had to master that pattern. So let's put that off to the side. Other things, because of the pandemic and not knowing if I'd have to go in the physical classroom, I started crocheting lace edges on handkerchiefs. So things like Aunt Laura had taught me all those many years ago. And I started out with white ones and just doing just plain picot lace. The picots are those kind of round tips at the very tops. I think you can see that okay. Moved into purple. That's my favorite color. So I did lavenders and purples. And then I got a little bored and thought, you know, there are so many wonderful, rich traditions. I think I want to branch out and do some other things. So I found a pattern, which I don't have the sample of that work. I gave it to my daughter, one of my daughters. You could do either strawberries or grapes. So here's a grape pattern that I thought I would crochet laces on these handkerchiefs, and they're cotton so that in case I had to go to the classroom and have the mask on all day, I'd be able to wipe the sweat away and have something beautiful to be able to do that with instead of just tissues or whatever. And doing that made me think, we had lost my mother-in-law last year, and while cleaning through her house, you know how you like to save keepsakes, and you can't keep everything, but you can keep some things. Well, I kept a red Christmas tablecloth that she had had it folded and put away so long that the edges had absolutely tattered away. But there were beautiful pieces of the fabric left. So after I did this one for myself as a test, I did the one with the red for my oldest daughter. Red is her favorite color, and she especially loves strawberries. So I crocheted her one with a square that I cut out from the tablecloth and machine hemmed it. I'm not into the hand hemming on those sort of things. And made her one of these, and it is just beautiful with the red strawberries on it, and she loves it. And instead of using it as a handkerchief, she wanted to use it for a new use, so she puts it in her office on her desk to adorn her desk and put some little precious keepsakes to her. So she has a piece of her grandmother at work with her all day, along with a piece that her mother, me, crocheted for her. And that just tells you how precious that was to her. Then I thought, you know, I need to do some more things. I can't just stop with grapes and pineapples and strawberries. I love butterflies. They're my favorite insect. So I found this pattern. It was a YouTube pattern. I've never done those before. Oh, and so was this one with the grapes on it. They were in Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese. Anybody out there speak Portuguese? I didn't think so. This one did not have subtitles to it either. So by very carefully watching, which was how I learned from my grandmothers and my great aunt how to crochet, I watched the videos and knew just enough Spanish to understand some of the Portuguese because they're similar, but not the same. And I was able to, let's see if we can hold that to where you can see it, do one with butterflies. Now, this one was particularly tricky because in the videos, they show you how to do this on the edging. They don't tell you how to turn the corners. But because of the things that I learned from my grandmothers and from different projects that you like to, I don't know about you, but I like to stretch myself. So I want to figure out how to make things work and how to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So I figured out how to turn the corners so that the butterflies would still be symmetrical and just look pleasing to the eye. So from, I don't know if I can hold it back. There we go. So from corner to corner, and my corners are sort of like beveled, I made it work. Let's see, what are some other pretty things I can show you? Now, knitting. I've knitted since I was 5. My mother liked to knit. I would crochet, or not crochet, knit pot holders when I was 5. When I got a little bit older, I wanted to do something more challenging. And my Irish grandmother always crocheted the ripple afghans with the single crochets. Most of us have seen those. I did those and they were fun, but I kind of found them to be almost a little bit boring because it's all crochet of single crochet, nothing extra in it. So I decided I wanted the challenge of knitting. Here's one of my samples of a knitted in some favorite family colors. I love purple. One of my daughters loves pink a lot. So I just decided that I was going to do that, and that would be that. Another thing I need to mention is that a lot of the yarns that I use are yarns that were passed on to me when my Italian grandmother passed. She was a yarn collector and rarely finished a project. In fact, I can't remember any project that she ever actually completed, but she had lots of pieces, parts all over, like so many of our grandmothers and mothers do. So those yarns are made from my grandmother's yarns. Let's see, how long ago did I crochet this one? Or yes, I did crochet this one. I crocheted a beach blanket about 5.5 years ago. I found myself unexpectedly unemployed when the charter school I was teaching for closed its doors permanently, day before Thanksgiving. But I decided I wasn't going to sit and mope. And I had all of these wonderful yarns that my Italian grandmother had hoarded over the years. What do you do with all these odds and ends? What do you do with all these pieces, parts? I started looking on Pinterest and around on the internet, and I came across a lovely pattern that I saw of a beach blanket that had a double crocheted ripple, and it had sea turtles on it. The pattern was an astronomical price, and being unemployed at the time was not in the family budget. I have grandmother's yarns. What to do? I'm going to figure out how to make this without a pattern. And this is the first large piece that I ever made without a pattern. So I had to design my pattern. So I looked for pieces, parts, looked for the stitches that I wanted. And then I got out graph paper because I wanted waves on it. So I hand charted on the graph paper where I wanted my waves to be. And, you know, coming from a family with modest means, you do what you can do and you get creative. Well, this one is my very favorite piece that I think I've ever done. It starts out with dry sand. The colors progress to get a little darker and darker till we get to wet sand. So here's your, I don't know if you can see the colors well here. This is brown, cream, lighter cream, very light cream. Let's hold this up. Here we start with the ocean and my charted waves. And we progress. My grandmother's favorite color, my Italian grandmother's favorite color was blue. She had so many different colors of blue. So of course I had to incorporate them. And the white pieces are the waves that I charted. So I have waves all along the beach. I wish I could spread this out enough for you to see. On here, I also hand crocheted 50 little loggerhead turtles who all have loose flippers. I hand sewed each one of them on. So there are 50 turtles who had just freshly boiled out of their nest, as they call it, and progressed it all the way down as I pull it up and pull it up to where they're out in the ocean and swimming. I don't know if you can see that well. So there we go with all those beautiful turtles. That, I think, is my pride and joy of everything that I've ever crocheted or knitted. And this is all entirely crocheted out of leftovers and unused yarns from my Italian grandmother. Doing all these things, to me, gives me a connection to family and to my grandmothers. I've continued their traditions, And in a way, I've gotten more creative, I think, in so many ways. They taught me how to do all my basics, and we all love beautiful things. So I just decided I was going to hone my skills and do whatever I could to make pretty things. Also, one of my daughters saw something on Pinterest she wanted. I don't have that to show you. I wish I did. It had a spirally crocheted piece like this, if any of you are familiar with those. A lot of children like to crochet those to make caterpillar bookmarks. Well, this one is about 5 or 6 feet long. My daughter asked me to make her this scarf. This is the basis, the spine of the scarf. And I hand knitted and crocheted flowers and leaves for her and hand sewed them on. It's just a decorative, excuse me, my throat is getting dry. A decorative piece that she just wraps around once, and it just looks beautiful. She's only worn it a few times, but she wanted another one out of other leaves, all kinds of different color leaves. So I have this whole basket full of these things. And one of the things I did during my unemployment was knit all of those and learned a new stitch called the crocodile stitch, if anybody's ever heard of crocodile stitch. And this is a pine cone that was to be on the end of her scarf. She's since decided after the first scarf that it's just too hard to wear because this is too thin. So we're going to make an improvement on it and at some point make a shawl. And instead of traditional fringes on the edges, we're going to put all of these different colored leaves. I've left the tails so that I can sew them onto the edges. All these different colored leaves. And I think this one, yes, this one is just leaves where the other one was flowers and leaves. So we have all kinds of beautiful colors. And all of these, again, are leftover yarns from my Italian grandmother so that she can have things, again, to remind her of her great-grandmothers, her grandmothers, her mom, things that are all parts of us and parts of who we are, to continue family traditions and have beautiful art, which it's just nice to have beautiful art things. And one of my daughters, my youngest one, she continues the tradition. She designs donuts and all kinds of little things that she crochets. Sometimes she sells them, sometimes she doesn't. I've never sold any of my pieces. My pieces I do for gifts, for family and friends, sometimes for their birthdays, holidays, weddings, showers, baby showers. And it's done something personal with love that they know that it's done with love. Just beautiful family keepsakes that they do love and they cherish. And I have seen some of these in their homes over the years. So you know that the family love and traditions are being carried forward. So that's what I do with my art. Fill it with love, carry on those traditions.
Thank you, Joni. That was absolutely beautiful also.
Thank you.
And, we just really, really love hearing about how this is such an important part of your whole family and your family traditions. At this point, we want to know if there are questions that any of you would like to address to any of our artists. We do have one for Anne, who wanted to know how you learned to quilt. Just part of a family, just how you learned to do this.
I started piecing with my grandmother. I've heard quilters say that quilting skips a generation. And I think that that's because that's often something you do with your grandmother while your mother's off doing something else. So that was how my grandmother took care of me when I was little. Well, we sewed. And then as I got older, it was just, I had teachers. We learned from each other. We learned by just sewing together. And so quilters, it sounds like Joni does too. You tend to work in isolation, doing stuff, figuring stuff out. But then you join a group and you hear say, oh, is that the way you do that? Or, oh, that's a good way to do it. So you learn from each other. So yeah, just over the years, and plus, we there used to be a lot of TV shows that were about quilters that they would show you different techniques, and it was great. Yeah. So yeah, just from each other. That's the idea.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't, okay, Angie, Sandy has asked, what's the name and location of your shop?
Yeah, my boutique's name is Aanchal Apparel and Accessories. It's on 417 West Main Street in Hummelstown. And if anybody wants to know what the word Aanchal means, so if you saw those images of saris, and I'll quickly open it again. So for example, this lady, this part of the sari that goes over the shoulder and just falls down, this is known as the Aanchal. And I named my boutique Aanchal because Aanchal has many different connotations. For example, if you watch Hindi movies and the young couple in love, the female's Aanchal will be blowing in the breeze. It's very attractive and alluring. But as the woman grows older and as she becomes a mother, Aanchal is where she holds her baby. So it's very motherly. It's like a comfort blanket. So it's got a very motherly connotation. As a culture, we're a modest culture, so woman will cover her head. When she's shy, she will hide her face in her aanchal. But then as you get older, as in my age group, and then you become that strong feminist, and then you have to bear all the burdens of life. So you have to keep that soft, nurturing side, but you also have to be that strong matriarchal figure of the family and in the community. Aanchal then holds the whole wide world in it. So the Aanchal is meant, the Aanchal symbolizes the woman's power and ability to bear everything that life has to offer. So if you look at the logo of my business, and I'll pull it out here in a minute, I have hand drawn the logo of my boutique, and it shows the woman's aanchal glowing in the breeze. It has that alluring connotation to it. But if you look at the figures and the drawings in it, it's got the mountains, it's got the sun, it's got the moon, it's got the peacocks, it's got the elephants, it's got everything. So she holds the whole wide world in her aanchal. So
Thank you.
long answer to a short
No,
question.
that was an excellent answer. It really does tie into so many of the things we wanted to be talking about today. Sometimes handmade textiles and hand designed textiles, such as all of you are doing, are really considered to be, and this is a word from academics, keys to emotional and spiritual ancestry, to your background. And I know a number of you have addressed this, but it's a way of generally women, though certainly not always women, of connecting generations, their families, as bits and pieces of domestic history, as preserving memories of time and place. So do you want us to comment on that? Any of our artists that may do, but Andrew, you're right there right now, so you can go for it.
That's a great question. And I actually had a similar question for Joni. Joni's got this beautiful history and culture of her family where she's weaving the Italian and the Irish into her family. Now, I have learned how to crochet and knit, and I've, occasionally knit and crocheted a few pieces here and there. And I've tried to teach that to my daughters. But one thing I struggle right now in the 21st century is these electronics are a challenge. So how do we get kids to get attracted to and see the value of this art, to keep these arts alive? Like, quilting, machines have taken over anyway, everything that hand sewing had to offer. It's a different texture for hand sewn and handmade things compared to something that's done by machine. Like, I still distinctly remember the day in Toronto. I had hand knitted a sweater for my then husband, and I was so proud that I finally finished a project because I have many unfinished projects. And then I'm walking down the street, and for $10, there was a sweater with far better patterns on it. I felt crushed. So my logical side of my brain is like, why would I spend weeks and weeks knitting another sweater if I could just get another one for $10? How do you deal with that?
I had the same experience with one of our kids. He said, he was 8 or 9. He said, how long does it take you to make a quilt? And I said, oh, it could take a month, could take a year, it takes a long time. He says, you can just go to Penny's and get a blanket for $20. You know that, right? So, yeah. But you know what I've seen? I've seen in quilting, it seems like it used to be that there was traditional quilting, and you were either a traditional quilter or you didn't quilt. And if you produced something that was not traditional, people would criticize you. And I think that discouraged a lot of people from coming into quilting. But now what's happening is the younger generation is coming in, and we're, as old traditional quilters, need to learn from them. And we're learning more about design and about fabric and about not being locked in to traditional, quote unquote. It has to be a certain way. You don't put this color with that color. Your points have to do this and that. We've sort of let go of some of that, but that doesn't mean that we're doing a bad job. It means that we're expanding how we think about quilting. So I think that that's important, because it is important to keep the young people coming in. Otherwise, it'll die. And quilting doesn't show any signs of dying as long as we keep admitting new people into it, and encouraging them. Yeah.
Joni, you want to chime in here?
Yes, I see a lot of the similar things with crochet. That's why I've tried to incorporate non-traditional colors for things. Who has purple doilies? Nobody. Well, I do. I made red doilies for my oldest daughter when she got married. She would not have wanted white. That's the traditional color to give for wedding gifts. Not my daughter. She wanted red. She got red. And I'm seeing a good trend in young people wanting to crochet more because they find that crochet is quicker and easier to do than many of the more intricate knitting things. Like today's kids, this is something that my mom started knitting years ago and she never finished. It is still on the knitting needles. It's round doilies. Look at some of the intricacy on there with knitting. So a lot of our young folks are finding that crochet is easier. And I've tried to kindle some of the love for that with my first graders even. These have been my keep me sane projects. Here's one with bunnies on the edges. Here's one with goldfish on the edges. I would show these to my first graders. Even the boys would be, wow, that is really cool. I want to learn to do that. So I think that's one way that we can help perpetuate the arts, is to show our things, wear your clothing in public, whatever, to help continually spark an interest in our younger people. And crochet doesn't have to be boring. This is kind of boring, right? But this is not boring. So let's just make it more interesting and less traditional, and we'll gather them in.
Thanks so much, all of you. Are there other questions that some of you would like to ask? Anyone who wants to chime in here, you can put it in the chat room, or Christopher might let you in. Okay. Well, if not, I want to thank all of our artists for participating today, Anne and Andrew and Joni. I think your presentations were marvelous. I really do. And I love the way all of you have dealt with tradition in such very different ways, and very fresh ways, and very innovative ways. I also want to point out, for those of you who will be in Harrisburg at the meetings in October, that both Andrew and Anne have studios within about 2 blocks of each other in Hummelstown, which is a really, really easy drive from Harrisburg. And we got some great restaurants that you can visit. And so I hope all of you will be able to be here. If you can't, thank you so much for joining all of us today. All of you take good care, and many, many thanks again to our artists.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you. This was good.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great job, everybody. Well done.
Thank you,
Thank
Christopher.
you.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye, all of you. Take very good care of yourselves.